Katri Ratia is a researcher in the Science of Religion unit in the Department of Social Sciences at the University of Fribourg, Switzerland, whose work focuses on vernacular and alternative forms of religion, material culture, and ritual studies. Her book Alternative Spirituality, Counterculture, and European Rainbow Gatherings, Pachamama, I'm Coming Home, Routledge, first published 2023, grows from 4 years of active fieldwork at rainbow gatherings in Europe, and 2 decades of personal participation in the scene. Earlier, she completed a master's thesis, in Finnish, on North Finnish magical traditions and the concept of vaki, signaling a long-standing interest in folk belief and the materiality of ritual. Katri Ratia's 2023 book, Alternative Spirituality, Counterculture, and European Rainbow Gatherings, Pachamama, I'm Coming Home, is a deep dive into what rainbow gatherings are, how they work, and why they matter, told in plain, on-the-ground detail. Ratia follows European rainbow camps, pop-up, money-free villages in the woods where people cook for each other, sit in big circles, sing, and make decisions without bosses. She traces where the scene came from, 60s/70s counterculture, how it spread across Europe, and how a camp is actually built and run, from seed camp and kitchens to water, toilets, first aid, peacekeeping, and the big shared food circle. The heart of her argument is that rainbow is a kind of DIY religion in everyday life. Meaning comes from doing, gifting, songs, campfire rituals, and stories, rather than from official beliefs or clergy. She shows how key ideas, nature as sacred, personal change, and we're all connected, are kept flexible so many paths can fit together. It's not rosy propaganda. She flags recurring tensions, gifting versus trading, chores and gender roles, relations with neighbors and police, cultural borrowing, leave no trace. In the end, the book treats rainbow as a working experiment in living differently, leaderless, cooperative, low-tech, and community-first, that lets people practice another way of being together, even if it's temporary and imperfect. Tiago Pinto says Ratia's book is a smart, clear, insider-informed tour of European rainbow gatherings that covers the basics, where it came from, how camps are set up, how people organize, the songs and stories, and the bigger ideas behind it. He especially likes the chapters showing how the camp's layout, healing spaces, altars, yoga spots, shared kitchens, helps people change and learn. His main gripe: the book doesn't dig deeply enough into tough issues like inequality, sexism, and racism, and too often shrugs them off with needs more study. He agrees the heart of rainbow is DIY organizing, consensus, and a gift economy, and he thinks Ratia is right to treat it as a lived, everyday spirituality rather than official beliefs. Bottom line, it's a strong, useful study, and impressive given the author's long involvement, though he wishes it confronted the hard stuff more directly. Chelsea Shelley basically says Ratia's book does a great job showing what European rainbow gatherings feel like day to day, less about fixed beliefs, more about sharing food, singing, and building a pop-up village together. She points out a big difference from the US. American rainbow centers on July 4th, flipping Independence Day into a ritual about global togetherness, and it deliberately uses US national forests to make a statement about public land and free access. Europe, by contrast, leans more toward the spiritual community vibe without that same political punch. Shelley also notes that in Europe you see more rainbow-adjacent eco-villages and long-term communities, while in the US, those kinds of communes usually aren't tied to rainbow. The American scene stays mostly a temporary, once-a-year thing. Her bottom line: Ratia shows how rainbow, on both continents, models a workable, leaderless, gift-based way of organizing life, even if the US version is more openly political, and the European one is more about everyday spiritual practice. In Chapter 1, Welcome Home, Katri Ratia drops you right into a huge outdoor potluck meets campout in the Italian Dolomites, where about 2,000 people sit in big circles around a smoky central fire, singing, making announcements, and getting ready to share a meal. No electricity, barely any phones, just voices carrying news of workshops, walks, and who's doing what next. From that lived scene, the author explains in plain terms what this rainbow family is, a global, loosely organized community, and how she'll talk about it, using everyday meanings of spirituality, think personal, do-it-yourself religion, and New Age, which she also calls alternative holistic spirituality. The point is to show how these gatherings work as temporary, self-run villages built on shared rituals, like the food circle, and common sense rules, and to set up the simple vocabulary the book will use so readers can follow along without specialist jargon. The history of rainbow gatherings tells the origin story of rainbow gatherings in simple, boots-on-the-ground terms. They grew out of late 1960s/early 1970s, hippie counterculture, think beans, road-tripping deadheads, communal living, anti-war idealism, and coalesced at the first big U.S. gathering in 1972, where thousands hiked past police roadblocks to camp, cook, sing, and pray for peace together in the mountains. From there, the rainbow family idea, no leaders, gift economy, big circles around a main fire, shared meals, music and ritual, became a repeatable template that people carried to other places. By the early 1980s it jumped the Atlantic, taking root in Europe, from 1983 onward, and then spreading worldwide, adapting to local scenes while keeping the same do-it-yourself, money-free, anti-hierarchy vibe. Along the way, the chapter explains the movement's folk heroes and lore, its recurring run-ins with authorities over permits and land use, and how a loose network of travelers turned a one-off utopian campout into a rolling, international tradition. Rainbow rising over Europe is the how it spread story. Rainbow gatherings jumped from the US to Europe in the early 1980s via traveling hippies and alt media, taking root in existing countercultural hubs and communes, then snowballing through word-of-mouth networks. Early on, big scenes like Copenhagen's Freetown Christiania pitched in. They even brought heavy kitchen gear in 1988, and the Rainbow family teamed up with Scandinavia's Ting movement in 1989, two circles with similar DIY rituals, councils, talking stick, sacred fire, sharing a site in Arctic Norway. From there, the annual European gathering roamed country to country, with headcounts always rough, they're estimated during meal circles and miss people coming/going. After the Cold War, the tradition surged eastward. A 1994 camp in war-scarred Slovenia sent peace and joy delegations to refugee camps. In 1995, the Czech Republic hosted. In 1997, Europe split the summer between Scotland and Greece, and in 1998, a notorious police raid shut down the Russian gathering near St. Petersburg. The 1990s-2000s also brought a boom in local and regional events: Balkans, Baltic, Canary Islands, the UK's WISE Islands, plus healing gatherings focused on sobriety and wellness, and sister networks like Rainbow Circle that kept the vibe but tweaked logistics, for example, fixed prices or programs. By the numbers, Europe had about 14 smaller rainbow events in 2000 and roughly 40 by 2010, with new countries joining into the 2010s, evidence of a template that traveled well, adapted locally, and kept bumping up against authorities and politics along the way. Tall trees, warm fire. The Rainbow Camp is the How This Pop-Up Village Actually Works tour. It walks you through a rainbow camp from the forest path in, past a hand-painted welcome home spot and an info board, into a ring-shaped village with a main fire in the middle and themed areas fanning out, communal kitchens, a tea/chai tipi, a kids' village, first aid/healing, workshops, and quieter camping zones. Everything runs on a gift economy. Food is cooked in big pots from donated ingredients, tools and skills are shared, and a magic hat collects cash for staples like rice, oats, and gas for supply runs. Daily life has a rhythm. Morning chores and water hauling, digging and tending compost toilets, gathering wood, workshops, and then the food circle where everyone sits, sings, keeps a moment of silence, and eats together. There are norms to keep the peace and limit impact: no selling, minimal tech, no photos at the main spaces, alcohol, if any, kept to a separate camp, and a volunteer shanty sena, peace crew, that cools conflicts without bosses or police. The chapter also covers the nuts and bolts, how Seed Camp scouts the site and builds basics like kitchens and water lines, how firekeepers and medics rotate, how paths and kitchens are made safe and clean, and how leave no trace clean down works at the end, taking the village apart so the forest looks, as much as possible, like they were never there. Let the circle be open, but unbroken. Communal Practices explains, in plain speak, how rainbows every day we do this together habits work. The big idea is the circle. People sit or stand in a ring to eat, talk, sing, make decisions, or meditate, because a circle keeps attention on the group, signals openness, and reminds everyone they're equal parts of the family. Mealtimes are the food circle. Kitchens call food circle now, and the whole camp gathers. It can take hours for thousands to be served, and it ends with the joyful magic hat procession. Music, dancing, and a hat, often carried by a kid, passed for voluntary donations to buy staples. There are other circles too: drum circles, part party, part spiritual trance, and singing circles for rainbow songs and bhajans by the main fire or temple spaces. Decisions are made in talking circles/councils using a talking object, so each person gets a full turn. It's slow by design to keep things fair, and Europe tends to call topic-specific circles as needed. The Big Vision Council picks the next gathering time/place and tries to balance heart-led visions with practical invitations from locals. Day to day, leadership is just focalizing. Anyone can step up to organize a task, but their authority lasts only as long as the job and the group support. Conflicts are handled through communication first, peacekeeping, shanti sena, and, if needed, bringing issues to a circle. Power is meant to be persuasive, not coercive. Overall, the chapter shows how simple rituals, circles, songs, shared meals, and lots of talking are the glue that holds a temporary, leaderless village together. Deep inside my heart I got this everlasting love. Rainbow folklore says, if you want to get rainbow culture, listen to what people say and sing, in jokes they tell, the words they use, and notice the props and costumes. They're the culture in action. It sketches rainbow's shared lingo, calling everyone brother/sister, welcome home, plus playful put-downs like drainbow, bliss ninny, weekend warrior, that both bonds the group and marks distance from Babylon, mainstream society. It samples the jokes, mostly self-deprecating hippie humor about staying forever, washing your dishes, and getting lost in the woods, that poke at real tensions around sharing and participation. It walks through the music, short, chant-like rainbow songs, circle songs, magic hat songs, about love, unity, earth, and the goddess, alongside bhajans and other devotional tunes that have been remixed into rainbow style. It also explains the movement's mythic backstory, widely shared whirling rainbow/warriors of the rainbow prophecies with disputed origins, which many take as meaningful origin myths, even if not literally native. Over time, influences widened beyond Native American sources to South/Central America, India, Oceania, etc., thanks to globalization and the Internet. Finally, it shows how objects and looks also speak, the talking stick treated as special, or dramatically burned to reject making relics, main fire ashes carried as sacred, and the playful, fantastical dress code, all part of place-making that turns a forest into a temporary, meaning-packed village. The upshot: folklore, songs, slang, stories, jokes, rituals, and gear, is how rainbow shares values, love, unity, gifting, and negotiates its frictions, more than any formal doctrine ever could. Our magic is the giveaway. Our magic is the song. Rainbow as counterculture boils rainbow down to its counterculture engine, sharing and singing as everyday rebellion. Instead of buying and selling, people feed each other through a gift economy, and the playful magic hat for staples, build everything themselves, sit in circles to decide things, and use song/ritual to keep the village glued together, basically practicing the world they want, not just talking about it. The chapter explains this as soft, prefigurative politics, refusing bosses, brands, and ticket gates, turning care work, kitchens, and firesides into the core institutions. It also keeps the picture honest. Rainbow still needs some cash and outside supplies, trading sometimes creeps in, chores can fall into old gender grooves, and leave no trace is an aspiration that takes constant work. There are recurring frictions, with officials over permits, with neighbors, and inside the camp over alcohol, safety, cultural borrowing, and who feels welcomed. The takeaway: Rainbow isn't a perfect utopia, it's a rolling, do-it-yourself experiment that uses gifts and songs to push back on consumer culture and test other ways of living together. Mother Earth gives us birth. Rainbow, as vernacular religion says, basically, treat rainbow like a down-to-earth, DIY religion. Instead of temples or clergy, meaning is built through everyday practice, circles, songs, stories, and shared tools, what scholars call vernacular religion, i.e., religion as people actually live it, not how institutions prescribe it. The chapter lays out how to study that. Look at folklore, songs, myths, jokes, personal miracle tales, as the raw data of belief, and don't expect tidy definitions because terms and ideas are fuzzy and remix-friendly in non-institutional scenes like Rainbow. It also explains why Rainbow feels both super open and proudly not Babylon. There's a big we, the family, built on inclusion and equality, but also a value-laden gap from mainstream society that helps the culture define itself. Authority comes less from titles and more from charisma, shared tradition, and experience, vernacular authority, which is why appeals to ancient wisdom carry weight even when the history is blurry. They work because the community recognizes them as meaningful. Finally, the chapter introduces the analysis the book uses, a mouse-inspired triaxial model of gifts across community, time, and the transcendent, and starts mapping Rainbow on the first two axes, how it bonds people, us and family, and how traditions travel and change over time, saving the sacred axis for the next chapter. This is celebration. This is sacred. Rainbow and the transcendent says, think of Rainbow's spiritual side as very this-worldly and hands-on. The author defines transcendence and, instead of hunting for dogmas, looks at three big feelings/ideas people keep pointing to: nature, treating life and the earth as sacred, transformation, personal change, and interconnectedness, the sense that we are one. She calls this mostly horizontal transcendence, meaning and awe are found in everyday life, care, and green spirituality, not only in faraway heavens or strict creeds. The chapter shows how common rainbow symbols and gifts, like the sacred/main fire, simple shrines/altars, and shared songs, let many beliefs fit under one roof. People project their own meanings onto the same practices without needing a priest or a single truth claim. It unpacks how the self here is imagined as open and many-sided, fulfilled in connection with others and the more than human world. That's why community itself can feel sacred, as part of nature and the cosmos. Transformation shows up in lyrics and fire rituals, fire as the change agent, while interconnectedness sounds like unity/oneness talk and reconnection with a more natural way of living, ideas you hear in circle chants and see in the camp's shared, circular layouts. Big picture, Rainbow treats gifts, songs, and simple sacred spaces as gateways to the sacred that stay deliberately underdefined, broad enough for many paths, and egalitarian enough to resist turning into a formal religion. See you in 5 minutes, is the wrap-up. Katri Ratia circles back to a live Rainbow scene and says the real big questions people argued about weren't lofty doctrines but everyday practices, what we eat and drink, how we organize, how we live together, because Rainbow is defined more by what folks do than by what they say they believe. She sums up her argument that Rainbow fits vernacular religion, with a down-to-earth horizontal sense of the sacred, nature, everyday care, inner life, rather than strict creeds, and connects this to ideas of resistance and world-building. The gathering works like a pop-up city where crafting, ritual and collective action prefigure a better society. It closes with a quiet night at the main fire in Italy. Old ruins and a disused railway around them. Talk of Mother Earth's patience, passing a coconut shell cup for vegan tea, a whispered Pachamama as a small, tangible picture of how Rainbow's gifts, songs, and shared chores become its everyday religion in practice.